The operator, or loader to the rest of the world, is located in the traditional position for Western tanks on the left-hand side of the gun. His primary focus is the Ordnance quick-firing 120mm tank L1, comes in at a mere 3 metric tons. Now, the War Office had decided that a reasonable level of expectation was that the loader was going to be able to load 4 rounds in the first minute, 16 rounds in 5 minutes, and be able to expend all 37 rounds in 55 minutes. Somebody at the gunnery school in Lulworth actually took a Conqueror and the loader out there and tried it out, and the result was that this was an unreasonable expectation. Loaders just could not do it that quickly, and indeed they even ran special PT courses purely for people who had been selected as Conqueror loaders. The reason for this was the large ammunition. Shells and casings were in 2 parts. Together they could weigh up to 80 pounds. And simply from looking at the size, as I pick up this one casing here, you can see I barely have enough room to get it over the edge, in under here, and then forward into the breech. There was not very much room in this tank. Now, to help them out, the British Army, the War Office in particular, decided that they were going to come up with some form of mechanized assistance. They contracted with a British company called Mullins. Mullins were known for making cigarette dispensing machines. They may have made great cigarette dispensing machines, but they weren't so used to the tank industry. The end result, what they built was 2 items. One was a ram assist, basically a big piston that would shove all the ammunition into the breech once the loader just dropped it onto the loading tray. The other one was an ejection system. In order to free up a little bit of room inside the turret, the shell casings would be automatically ejected outside the turret. One worked, one didn't. Of course, the War Office, being the War Office, decided to reject the working device, the rammer, but they decided to keep the ejection system. And the Mullins ejection gear was an Achilles heel for the tank pretty much throughout its entire service life. The way it worked was the gun recoils, goes back in the battery, shell casing gets ejected, falls down, gets basically directed into the catch at the bottom of the lift, trips a micro switch. The shell casing then gets raised on a platform majestically out through the ejection chute. Hatch opens up on the far side of the turret, out goes the ejected shell casing, and the system resets with the platform coming back to the bottom. The whole thing takes about 5 seconds, so there was never any fear about the loader being faster than the ejection system. Well, that should be 5 seconds when it worked. However, they thought about this. There was a manual backup device. The commander had a hand crank. He was able to hand crank the ejected case all the way out and all the way back down again. The catch was that this took so long that the war would be over by the time he got to your second round. Also to his left we have the Browning 30 caliber machine gun, interior light, intercom system, and of course he's got his own hatch here. He also had the very important job of being in command of the boiling vessel, the tea maker to the rest of us, which is around here somewhere. The manuals seem to vary. Most manuals state it is at the front right of the hull interior, so a little later on when we traverse around we'll see if we can find it. I certainly can't find it in here right now. Also at the loader station you'll find the radio set, wireless number 19. Loader's job was tuning in the frequency. He didn't actually communicate on the radio. That was usually the job of the commander. If sharp-eyed personnel will notice that this was not the original radio that came with this vehicle. When they were doing the restoration, I guess it was a lot easier to find number 19 in other places. Directly underneath you've got the stowage for the coaxial 30 cal. You see it in traditional machine gun boxes in belts of 200. Unlike most tanks, at least the gunner has a hatch of his own, but this is definitely the most constrained position I've been in any tank that I can recall. Alright, so gunner controls. Traversing and elevating is a two-handed operation. He has a power traverse for his right hand. He has elevation for his left hand. That is also where his trigger is. In the event of a power failure, there are manual backups. There is a simple hand crank above him and to the right, and believe me, this thing does not crank quickly. Elevation for manual is actually a pump. As you pump forward and backwards, the gun goes up, or you press in the reverse lever. As you pump forward and backwards, the gun goes down. Elevation limits are plus 15 and -7. A full traverse with the power control is going to take you 24 seconds, and I don't want to even think about doing a full traverse with a hand crank. I would say it took me a good 10 minutes just to move it 60 degrees. Gunner's primary sight, number 10 Mark I. Protected by an armoured housing, can be opened and shut very quickly. 2 sights. The main one is a unity sight, unmagnified, and in the field of vision there's a little circle. That circle shows you what is actually going to be seen when you put your head to the primary sight, and this is a by 6 magnification. Just to the left we have a knob here for bore sighting. Further to the left there is an indicator for trunnion tilt, and this will show the gunner how much the tank is tilting one way or the other, and he can then apply calculations for the correct offset for elevation.
About half wide.
Above and to the right are 2 warning lights. The first one is the gun is ready to fire light. This lights up when the gun is ready to fire. Gunner can then pull the trigger, service the target. The one underneath is the weapon not ready light, for lack of a better term. Once the tank gets to 1.5 miles an hour, a micro switch trips and it turns the gun into carry mode. What carry mode basically is it stops the gun from being locked to the controls, because the gun weighing 3 tons, as the tank is bouncing around, they didn't want to have the gun rigidly fighting with the tank to maintain its position relative to the tank. As a result, the gunner has basically lost control of the gun. It just kind of waves around in a sort of, it looks stabilized. It looks like the gun is stabilized as it's traveling. It is actually not. This little knob down under here is the elevation trim to stop the gun from just drifting too far up or down. Once the tank got to where it was going, it would then take about 5 seconds to reset the micro switch, at which point the gun still could not be controlled by the gunner. He could traverse left and right, but the gun was still doing this, going up and down. Until finally, after a few seconds, the gun decided, okay, yeah, we've stopped moving, repressurizes the whole system, and the gunner then retained control of the gun and away went. This was not seen as a problem because the tank was never supposed to fire from the move anyway. It was always going to be one terrain feature behind, supporting the advance of the lighter tanks, which turned out to be Centurions.
You're not going to be doing this with somebody shooting at you.
The gunner's right is the main control box. You got your 2 lights for your main gun and your secondary armament. The actual safety is here. Center position is safe, main gun, secondary machine guns. Subsidiary controls are for the lights and reticles and brightness and so on. This little handle here is attached to a little squirty bottle, which then squirts water onto the face of the gunner's periscope, the outside. That way he can clean it without having to get out of the tank. At the back of the breech block, because it has a percussion firing pin, this lever will set it to fire, or if you have to recock it. Up to the left here is the cant indicator. A little spirit level here will show the gunner just how much the tank is canted. It's got a little calculation table in here, so if you're shooting 120 millimeters APDS at this range, you apply the following amount of correction and offset.
This way you need to find an intern.
Yeah. Now you get to film me trying to get out of this thing. That's $300.